You go from being super excited, you're having a baby, the baby's here, and now you've got this diagnosis and this complete worry. Is your child going to have a wonderful life?
Welcome to Heart to Heart with Anna. I am Anna Jaworski and your host. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a heart mom. My son was born with a single ventricle heart, and he is the reason I host this podcast. I'm so happy you're here with us today, and I'm very excited to feature another heart mom. Today's show is entitled A Family Dealing with Tetralogy of Fallot. Deborah Meisten and her husband are the parents of a baby who was born with Tetralogy of Fallot, or TOF. Deborah and her husband are in healthcare. She was trained as a pediatric nurse practitioner, and her husband is a pediatrician. Their son is now 16 years old. The family is preparing for the future to empower their son to transition to age-appropriate healthcare responsibilities, and we have Deborah Meisten here with us today. Welcome to Heart with Anna, Deborah.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really happy to be here.
This is great. I love having another heart mom to talk to, and we can go way back because your baby is 16. Let's start by talking about what your pregnancy was like.
I had a completely normal, healthy pregnancy, no issues at all. I had some nausea, morning sickness early on, but otherwise it was totally healthy. I had elected not to do the prenatal screenings because some of them have kind of a high false positive rate. So instead of that, when I was 18 weeks pregnant, I requested a level 2 ultrasound. And that's when they picked up the Tetralogy of Fallot.
Wow. So you found out really early.
I did. That was actually not a great day, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
We went in and the sonographer was doing the ultrasound. We didn't really want to find out the gender of the baby, but it was really obvious to us that it was a boy on the ultrasound. And I remember my husband was just smiling just because we had just found out. He would have felt the same way if it had been a girl, but yeah. I noticed that she kept going back towards where the heart was. And I had the sense that there was something else going on. She called in the perinatologist who came in, and she said, yeah, your child probably has Tetralogy of Fallot. He might have Down syndrome. We won't be able to know for 2 more months because it's too early for sure, but he's definitely going to need surgery the first day of life. And she walked out of the room. I'm
so impressed, though, that she knew Tetralogy of Fallot. I mean, she didn't need a pediatric cardiologist to come in. She just knew it.
She was guessing, but she saw some of the telltale signs that you look for with Tetralogy of Fallot. There's a boot-shaped heart. There are certain things that she was looking for, but she did not know that we had a healthcare background. And if we had not already known, we were broadsided as it was, but
sure.
Literally, she just walked out of the room. I actually started having contractions from the stress of that situation. So my husband, thankfully, this is where being in healthcare was a huge advantage. He picked up the phone, called a friend, and we went over to a big hospital across town the same day, have the cardiologist look at the baby and determine, in fact, he does have Tetralogy of Fallot. We did not have to wait 2 months. We knew right away. Yeah.
Wow. Oh my gosh. But what a huge relief for you that, terrifying, yes, but relief too that you had people you could call. They would see you right away. You weren't put off. And okay, so we've got a diagnosis. It's not what you want, but now you can plan your course of action.
Yes. I think for me anyway, the not knowing was a huge stress.
Oh, yeah.
We even did a amnio
that
same day. So I knew within 24 hours that he did not have Down syndrome. He did not have DeGeorge or some of the other things that they screen for that can occur with Tetralogy of Fallot sometimes, but not all the time. Mm-hmm. And the reason I had elected not to do the triple screen was because it wasn't going to change the course of the pregnancy in my mind. Mm-hmm. But just having that information really helped empower me to prepare for what was coming. And if there was something that we could do before he was born to help him, we definitely wanted to know that. And just being able to get that information was really helpful.
Absolutely. You're so lucky that you didn't have to wait because I think it's that waiting that is so stressful.
Yes.
And to be told, oh, well, you have to wait for 2 months. Oh my gosh, that's interminable.
Yes, it was. I don't think that I would have been able to carry the pregnancy just from the stress level and
Yeah.
just the way my
Yeah.
body was reacting so quickly.
Well,
You
yeah,
know,
if you started
yeah,
having contractions right away,
I
oh my
did.
gosh, Deborah, at
I
18
did.
weeks, that is not a good
Yeah.
sign. Yikes.
No, and I mean, it settled down before the amnio, and it was just really severe cramping. And I had an OB that was extremely experienced, and I trusted her implicitly. Otherwise, I don't even know that I would have elected to do that. But luckily, it worked out
Right.
fine. And sure enough, they were correct.
Okay, so you're at the bigger hospital. Your husband, it sounds like, called a friend and they confirmed the diagnosis. What did they tell you after that? Were you familiar with the diagnosis of Tetralogy of Fallot?
We were. We both were very familiar with it. Well, I say very familiar with it. I knew what it was. I knew
Mm.
what it was. I knew historically how people with Tetralogy of Fallot before the invention of the bypass machine didn't live very long. Their life expectancy was not very long. And that was just the most miraculous invention in my mind.
Yeah, right.
But I really didn't know, especially at that point, how long people with Tetralogy of Fallot could live, their quality of life.
Mhm.
And I think that first generation that had benefited from that invention of the bypass machine were just then reaching adulthood. And I'll tell you, this was the craziest thing. A few months after that, I was still pregnant. I was walking around my neighborhood. I hardly told anyone about the diagnosis, and I just happened to run into a neighbor that I did not know well, but she was watering her lawn. She stopped. We chatted for a minute. She asked how the pregnancy was going, and for whatever reason, I said, well, we know that he has a heart defect and he's going to need surgery probably between the ages of 4 and 6 months of age, but we'll just have to see. And she said, oh, do you mind if I ask what he has? And I
Mhm.
thought, there's no way she's going to know what Tetralogy of Fallot is. But I told her, and she said, oh, I have that. And
Oh my
I just
gosh.
looked at her. Yeah, the hairs just stood on end.
That just
And
happened to me. I just got goosebumps. Oh my
yeah,
gosh.
it was, I don't even have words really, even now, this many years later, but it was a gift because I just looked at her dumbfounded. And she said, yes. She said, my parents were told I wouldn't live past 12. She said she had her first surgery when she was 3, another at 12, another at 16, and at 19, they invented the bypass machine. And she said, look, I'm 56 years old. I'm married. I have 2 kids and 3 grandchildren, and they're all healthy, and I have a wonderful life.
Heart to Heart with Anna is a presentation of Hearts Unite the Globe and is part of the Hug Podcast Network. Hearts Unite the Globe is a non-profit organization devoted to providing resources to the congenital heart defect community to uplift, empower, and enrich the lives of our community members. If you would like access to free resources pertaining to the CHD community, please visit our website at www.congenitalheartdefects.com for information about CHD, the hospitals that treat children with CHD, summer camps for CHD survivors, and much, much more. You are listening to Heart with Anna. If you have a question or comment that you would like addressed on our show, please send an email to Anna Jaworski at anna@hearttoheartwithanna.com. That's anna@hearttoheartwithanna.com. Now, back to Heart with Anna.
Okay, I'm wiping the tears out of my eyes. Oh my gosh, Deborah. What a story. This is amazing. Well, let's move on because I know that your son is much older than a baby now, but let's talk about the support that you and your husband received. It looks like you already received the support in a very unexpected place with your neighbor, which I think is just a beautiful story. But I also know that you have friends in high places as far as having friends that are in a medical field, what kind of support did you receive those, so many months carrying a baby that you knew would be born with this problem and then immediately after?
Well, we had a lot of great support. Our family was very supportive. They were broadsided as well. None of them were medical people, so they really didn't know the best way to give us support other than just being good listeners and asking what we needed, that kind of thing. My sister in particular was just a phenomenal support the whole first year of his life. But our friends were wonderful, and I have to say, having the medical backgrounds that we do was very much a benefit in some ways, and in other ways it was a double-edged sword. You know, when somebody says, oh, your child's on bypass, or we had to put them back on bypass, we know what that means. We know what the risk of that entails, especially 16 years ago.
Sure.
And it's hard to not let your mind go down every rabbit hole.
Sure. Yeah.
In some ways, it's a real negative, but in other ways, it's a big positive. And being able to talk to other physicians who can tell you things off the record, their opinion of surgeons and their opinion of facilities, and just pulling up some medical information from the medical school library that is really easily accessible to us. Really, anyone can get it, but we kind of already knew how to navigate that system.
And you could understand it, because I could get some of those medical articles by going to the graduate library where I was a student, but it wasn't easily understandable to me because my background was as a teacher of the deaf. So you could understand all that terminology, which again, I'm sure was a double-edged sword. On the one hand, it was probably scary. On the other hand, at least you knew with great accuracy what it was that you were facing.
Absolutely. And even just when we first brought him home, the fact that we both knew what a normal, healthy baby looks like, what a sick baby looks like, just seeing the spectrum of healthy to not healthy in a newborn and how to do normal newborn care. I had cared for newborns in the newborn nursery for years, and not having to learn that as new parents, because we were new parents, was also a benefit. We already know questions about breastfeeding and sleeping and feeding issues and all kinds of things that were an advantage.
But it's one thing to be working in the NICU or to be working in the hospital and working with sick children and getting to go home and get a break from it than it is when you're the full-time caregiver. Did it feel a little bit different for you being the mom?
Really, I think being able to know how to give a newborn a bath and just all that kind of stuff was a gift. My husband, as a physician, he never gave a newborn a bath, but he knew I knew how to do it. So some of those things new parents have to navigate. That part was easy. I think the hard part was just what it would be with anyone with a child who is born with a physical challenge ahead, where the future is unknown and there's all these questions of what kind of life are they going to have, and grieving the loss of the dream of a healthy child. It's something you have to go through. You do have to feel those feelings and then embrace the reality that you are living in, and then get the support you need to go past that.
I love what you said about embracing the reality, because just because you understood what his condition was and you understood how to take care of him, what the diagnosis meant, what the prognosis meant, doesn't mean that you don't still feel that great grief of not having a baby who is perfectly healthy.
It's true.
It's okay. It's okay to cry, and it's okay to grieve the loss, because this is your only child, right?
Yes. And I think it's really important that you feel those feelings. There comes a point where you can't let them stay in that space and let that grief overwhelm you so that you can't function. But when you have children that go through the things that they go through, especially that first year of life, and for many heart families, it's years of hospitalizations or surgeries, and seeing your child with their chest left open and their heart beating after surgery, like these kinds of things are very traumatic. And it's an ongoing process. It's really been a lifelong process of understanding that there will be times where that kind of crisis mode will reoccur. You have this post-traumatic thing that just kicks in and you don't always know when it's going to happen.
That's for sure.
And then there's other times where you're kind of at a calmer state and just trying to navigate normal life. But you still have that in the back of your mind, and it does influence how you parent, how you handle other stresses in your life, and it can really be a challenge.
Yeah, it can, but you've said twice already how you received certain gifts, and that speaks to me volumes of your personality, Deborah. You're the person who finds that silver lining, and that has probably enabled you to live a much happier life than if you couldn't see the rainbow for the rain. You're a special person.
That's kind of you to say that. Yeah, that's very kind of you to say that. Honestly, I think part of it is just the way I was raised, but I think a lot of it is just trying to learn about how to face a challenge in the best way that is healthy for me as a mom, and also is the healthiest way to navigate this for my son, and to teach him how to navigate challenges that he's going to have in his life, whether they're related to his health or something else.
Right.
And to look at those things as opportunities to grow rather than things that are debilitating.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more, because for most of us, it's not just health issues that we're going to have to face in our lives that can be a challenge, but there are going to be challenges in all different aspects of our lives, especially if we lead a life that's rich. And that's what we hope for our children, is that they can lead a life rich, full of good people, good literature, maybe travel, hobbies, sports, music. I mean, if you fill your child's life with rich opportunities like that, you're also going to be filling them with challenges. And learning how to face those challenges is a life lesson that hopefully they'll keep with them and internalize, like it looks like you have from what your parents have taught you. Okay, so there's a huge change that goes from being a professional working couple to all of a sudden the parents of a sick child. Did you feel that your medical knowledge prepared you to be the parent of a baby with special medical needs?
Not necessarily. I would say one thing stands out to me that was probably a benefit. And this was when we worked with families who had children with chronic illnesses or different diagnoses that might go on for years before being resolved, and sometimes never being resolved, in the sense that they don't have to worry about it anymore. We definitely could see in our own practices cases where the trauma of the parent having the diagnosis negatively affects the child, depending on how they respond to it themselves. And it was interesting because when we got discharged from the hospital, our son did have surgery. His repair was at 17 weeks of age, and he had a very complicated post-op period. We were there 6 weeks. They were expecting us to be home in 3 to 5 days.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a pretty dramatic stay. And so when we left, though, as we were getting ready to leave the hospital, his cardiologist, who we really liked, came and sat down with us and said, "Look, guys, I've been doing this 27 years. I see 50 kids a week in the cardiac clinic, and most of them are medically fine. They're stable. They're doing great. There's a huge percentage of them that have psychological issues, pretty significant ones." And he said, almost always, it's not because there's anything wrong with the child. It's because their parents cannot get past the beginning, the trauma of the beginning. And we had seen that ourselves. So that really resonated with us, and we took it to heart more than maybe we would have otherwise. He said it's very common, and it makes sense, that parents would either do one of two things. Typically say yes to everything the child wants forever. Yes, indulge them, overindulge them, or do the other thing, keep them in a bubble and don't let them live their life. And they're just worried and afraid for them all the time. And that absolutely can translate to the child. And it's certainly never intentional in my mind. No one would ever intentionally do that to hurt their child's development or anything, but it does have an impact. And so it made us from the beginning be super mindful and intentional in our parenting and make sure we had each other to kind of check each other when one of us was maybe freaking out a little too much for the situation, or the other one was, maybe we shouldn't give him this right now. He doesn't necessarily need that at 7 or whatever. We would check each other more and just be mindful of that. And I think that was the gift that was helpful to us.
This content is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. The opinions expressed in the podcast are not those of Hearts Unite the Globe, but of the hosts and guests, and are intended to spark discussion about issues pertaining to congenital heart disease or bereavement. Before the break, we were talking to Deborah about her life as a mom, and especially as a heart mom, and the parent of a heart warrior with Tetralogy of Fallot, which is a critical congenital heart defect requiring surgery within the first year of life. In this segment, I want to ask Deborah some advice that she might have for other families. So let's start by finding out what advice you have for other family members who might be facing a journey of heart surgeries and uncertainty, which is what we were just talking about before we went to break.
Gosh, I would say it really depends where in the journey they are. My advice that I would give, I'd say in the beginning, give yourself a lot of grace because it's overwhelming and you need to be kind to yourself and patient and ask a lot of questions. You'll repeat the same questions because it's not all going to stick.
Oh my gosh, I'm so glad you said that. Yeah, it doesn't always stick the first time. Do you think that's part of the PTSD or part of the stress and anxiety that we're under?
I think in the beginning, it's just being overwhelmed. Nobody expects to have a child with physical challenges right out of the gate. So you're broadsided. You go from being super excited, you're having a baby, the baby's here, and now you've got this diagnosis and this complete worry. Is your child going to have a wonderful life? Are they going to be the kid that's going to be playing soccer with the oxygen tank dragging behind them on the soccer field? You don't know what to picture for them. You don't know what it's going to be.
Or if they're even going to make it to the age where they could play
soccer. Absolutely. Are they going to even leave the hospital with you? You don't really know. And are you going to be equipped to give them what they need when they need it? And so I would just say a lot of grace, ask for help, get support, get your information, talk to everyone that you can about getting the best care that you can for your child. Start taking on that advocacy role early on because you're going to need it.
Absolutely. So I'm curious, you told me about the neighbor that you met when you were walking that one time. Did you ever go back and introduce your son to her? Did you ever talk to her again?
Yes, I definitely remember walking through the neighborhood and stopping and talking to her. But we did not stay connected. We did not live in that state much longer. We moved when our son was 2.5 and to another state where we've been ever since. But I think about her all the time. When I tell the story, it still gets me very emotional thinking about that and what a gift that was. It was such an unusual thing. And I just don't think it was an accident for sure.
I know. I don't know how you feel spiritually, but I kind of feel like she was an angel put on earth here to be there just for you at that one moment in time because you really needed her.
Yes, for sure. And that actually brings me back around to what question was too, which other things I would give advice to people in this situation. For us, our faith was key and still is, and it is for our son as well. It's really helped him. And just having a network of people that you can turn to. Now there's online support groups that didn't exist when he was an infant. So that's a huge benefit to people, and I would encourage them to take advantage of that.
Yeah, I think all of that advice is spot on. And it would have been spot on when your son was a baby. And even though it is 16 years later, it's still spot on advice because that is still something, even though we do have the internet, even though people around the world can connect easier than they could 16 years ago, you still want to reach out and embrace that. you were just in the right position since you and your husband had that medical training. And it sounds like you had a lot of support from your family and friends as well. That made a huge difference for you.
We've been really lucky since we moved to the new location. He's had the same cardiologist now for 14 and a half years. We have a great relationship with him, and he's been a wonderful partner in helping our child walk this journey. He always talks to him when we go into the office for a checkup or an appointment. He doesn't even look at my husband and I until he has talked to our son. Even our son just 5 weeks ago had his second open heart surgery.
Oh.
And he had no procedures in between other than CT scans, stress tests, MRIs every few years, that kind of thing, but no catheterizations, no more invasive surgeries. Mm-hmm. And he's been doing great. We knew since he had his first surgery, it was not a valve sparing surgery. They removed his pulmonary artery valve. It wasn't able to be repaired, and it was more obstructive. So we knew at some point he would need a valve placed, and we were hoping by the time he needed one, the technology would be there to put one in through the cath lab.
Sure.
And not have big invasive surgery. And that technology actually is here now. He was even in a clinical trial to see if he was a good fit for that, and he is not. His anatomy. Yeah, and you know what? We had some questions about it too. So I honestly think it worked out the way it was supposed to work out. So we're thankful that we have access where we live to a world-class surgeon, because when we first moved to where we are, that surgeon was not here, and I don't know that we would have stayed in the state for the surgery. But that has changed, and this person had relocated to our area a few years ago. So we just felt blessed that the stars kind of aligned. He did another open heart surgery, which of course you never want for your child, but if they need it, you want them to do well. And he did great. So, I mean, he was home less than 65 hours later.
Wow.
And he's out right now hiking with his dad.
Oh my gosh.
And he's doing great. He's
doing great. Okay, so it sounds like the family has really worked to help your son transition with the assistance of the pediatric cardiologist, just by gradually having him assume more of a pivotal role when you have your cardiology visits. And even in this surgery, it sounds like your son was front and center and knew what was happening to him and was part of the care team. Would that be accurate?
100%. Yes. Even when he was in the clinical trial, that was at a different facility in another state. So we were doing conference calls with my husband, my son, and I, and the principal investigator for the trial for literally several hour-long calls where we would all ask questions. Our son would ask plenty of questions. Sometimes he'd slide a note across the table saying, "What does that mean?" Or like, what are you guys saying? What's the definition of that word? And he would also ask his own questions. But his cardiologist would always say to him, "Hey, at age 16, this is your decision. You are the patient. As much as I am fond of your parents, at age 16, no one is going to strap you down and perform open heart surgery on you against your will. This is your decision. This is your call. Your parents and I are here to advise you, but it is your decision." So we followed his lead, and we've tried to do that, honestly, since he was young. But with this, we just really said, do you want to pursue another clinical trial? There is another device, or we could go to open heart surgery. And we had already met the surgeon, and he had spent an hour and a half, and our son had asked multiple questions of the surgeon. I don't even ask my questions until I've listened to what everyone else is saying. Because sometimes he'll ask a question that I was going to ask.
And it's good that you waited a beat or two and gave him a chance to formulate that question himself and ask it before you jumped right in. I'm guilty of doing the opposite. I'm guilty of a question comes to my mind, I have to ask it before I forget it.
That goes back to write things down.
That's true.
Write things down, because I will forget things too. I mean, I have to write things down, and that way I'm not panicked that my question won't get answered at the end if it wasn't asked. The other thing I would say too is, because we have that healthcare background, we're able to explain things to our son and kind of navigate the system and navigate some of the information in the terms and things like that. And I would say if you don't have someone in your family that can do that for you, seek one out. And even if you're in the hospital, ask for a patient advocate if you feel like you're not understanding the information that you're being given.
That's a great idea. Not all hospitals have that, though, do they?
I don't think so. I think a lot of them in the United States do, but we're lucky here in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it never hurts to ask. You can always
Absolutely.
ask. And if your hospital doesn't have one, go out to Facebook, friends. Join a Facebook group. There are so many groups for families of children with heart defects. There are specific ones for specific defects, especially ones that are more common, like Tetralogy of Fallot, hypoplastic left or hypoplastic right heart syndrome, TGA, or transposition of the great vessels. You'll see support groups specifically for those. But then there are more general groups that just say heart moms or heart mums, which lets you know the difference between Australia and United Kingdom versus America, which I think is kind of cute. I belong to both because I love to see what the Australians and UK moms and moms all around the world have to say. And you can post in there, I'm having trouble, I'm not medical, I don't understand this, I'm scared. And you would be surprised who will come forward and say, I can do this with you. If you do a Zoom call, I can be your patient advocate. I mean, that's one of the things that I love about our heart community is that people really are there for each other. Don't you think, Deborah?
Yes, definitely. I've noticed even in the last couple of months, even just in the last 5 weeks since our son's last surgery, I feel like I've been able to be on the giving end, not just the receiving end of that care more. Mm-hmm. I probably just have more bandwidth now that this surgery is behind us to be able to do that kind of thing. But it is not uncommon for me to see a question like that and then to private message the person and connect with them either online or a FaceTime call or something like that and give them more detail than you can just quickly give in a post, but at least just offer a perspective on what they're asking if I feel like it's a good fit for my experience.
Well, I just love that. You have been such a delightful guest. I cannot believe our time is up already, but I feel like you did a great job of giving our listeners some ideas for ways they can help their teens to transition and also ways for the parents just to handle life with a child with a chronic illness. Thank you for being on the show, Deborah.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Well, it has been a lot of fun, and I've really appreciated how positive and uplifting your story has been.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Well, that's it for this week's episode. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did, my friends. If you enjoyed this program, please take a moment and leave a review on whatever platform you use to listen to our show, because that will help other families to know what they can expect with Heart to Heart with Anna. And remember, my friends, you are not alone.
Thank you again for joining us this week. We hope you have been inspired and empowered to become an advocate for the congenital heart defect community. Heart to Heart with Anna, with your host Anna Jaworski, can be heard every Tuesday at 12 noon Eastern Time.